The vast chamber of the Celestia Nexus hummed with the cacophony of 100 different species conversing in their native tongues. Translators worked overtime, converting the clicks, whistles, and rumbles into comprehensible speech for all delegates present. The Grand Hall, suspended in Neptune's orbit, glimmered with holographic displays showing the latest trade routes, military deployments, and diplomatic relationships that made up the complex web of the Solar Concord. In the back of the room, partially hidden in shadow, sat Jax Merrick. The lone human representative wasn't officially recognized as a delegate. His presence was merely tolerated, a gesture of supposed inclusivity that fooled no one. The Earth had been on tenuous terms with the Concord ever since the Proxima Rebellion of 2381, when human separatists had attempted to seize control of key jump points. Though Jax had nothing to do with that conflict, his species marked him as suspect. He adjusted his posture, feeling the weight of a dozen alien gazes upon him. The Hazari delegation's compound eyes flickered in his direction, their chitinous mandibles clicking in what he recognized as disapproval. The Kalen representatives, with their translucent skin revealing the pulsing of multicolored organs, whispered among themselves, occasionally glancing his way. "The human should not be here," one of them said loudly enough for their translator to pick up, caring little if Jax heard. "They cannot be trusted with matters of interplanetary security." Jax maintained his stoic expression. 6 years in exile had taught him when to speak and when to listen. Today was for listening. The Solar Concord convenes this emergency session to address growing concerns of instability in the Outer Rim territories, announced Archon Veritas, the elected head of the Orium government. Her blue-tinted skin seemed to absorb the light around her, giving her an otherworldly glow that matched her commanding presence. "We have reports of unregistered shipments moving through restricted corridors, and intelligence suggests possible involvement of separatist elements." The year 2387 had been one of growing tensions. After decades of relative peace following the Great Expansion, the Solar Concord was beginning to fracture along old fault lines. Resource disputes, territorial claims, and ancient grudges were resurfacing. Earth, once the birthplace of humanity's reach into the stars, was now viewed with suspicion by many of the Concord's founding species. Jax noted the subtle expressions crossing the faces of various delegates. The Taurians seemed unusually agitated, their normally placid features tensed with what appeared to be anxiety. The Zephyrians, humanoid, but with skin that rippled like wind-blown clouds, maintained carefully neutral expressions, always the peacekeepers. As the session droned on with procedural matters, Jax felt a subtle vibration against his wrist. He glanced down at his comband, carefully shielding it from view. An anonymous message had arrived. "Western Corridor, 10 minutes. Crucial information. Come alone." Jax deleted the message immediately. Anonymous tips were rarely good news, especially for an exiled human with a complicated past. But his instincts, honed during years in Earth's Special Task Force, told him this wasn't something he could ignore. When the Archon called for a brief recess, Jax slipped away from his seat, moving with practiced nonchalance toward the Western Corridor. He kept his gait relaxed but purposeful, nodding acknowledgments to the few delegates who deigned to meet his eyes. The Western Corridor was nearly empty, its ornate architecture featuring flowing metallic sculptures meant to represent the harmony of the conquered species. Jax found the irony bitter. There was little harmony to be found these days. "Human," the voice came from a shadowy alcove. Jax turned to see a Taurian diplomat, Kashara, her scaled face partially obscured by an atmospheric regulator. Taurians required a higher methane concentration than was standard in the Nexus. "Ambassador Kashara," Jax acknowledged, keeping his voice low. "You called me here?" "Not directly," she replied, her vertical pupils dilating. "But I arranged for the message. We must be brief." She extended a six-fingered hand, passing him what appeared to be a standard data pad. This contains evidence of corruption at the highest levels of the Orium government. They are planning to undermine opposing factions through manufactured evidence and targeted assassinations. Jax's expression remained neutral, but his heart rate accelerated. Why give this to me? I'm hardly influential in Concord politics. Because you are the only one who has nothing to lose, Kishara replied. And because your species has a particular talent for disruption. Before Jax could respond, the lights in the corridor flickered, once, twice, then stabilized. A security alert. Someone had detected unauthorized data transmission. Kishara's eyes widened. They know. Be careful, human. The truth on that pad could destabilize the entire Concord. Or save it. She turned and moved swiftly away, blending into a group of passing delegates. Jax slipped the pad into his jacket, feeling its weight like a gravitational anchor. As he started back toward the main chamber, the building's AI announced in a soothing voice, "Security scan in progress. All delegates, please remain in your designated areas." The main chamber doors sealed just as Jax approached them. Through the transparent panels, he could see security personnel beginning to move through the crowd, scanning devices in hand. They were looking for unauthorized tech, or perhaps a specific data signature. Jax casually changed direction, heading toward the public viewing galleries. His mind raced through the Nexus floor plan he had memorized years ago, an old habit from his military days that had proven useful in civilian life. There was a maintenance access 2 levels down that connected to the environmental control systems. If he could reach it. "Stop right there, citizen!" Jax turned to face a security officer, one of the Orium's elite guards. Humanoid, but with a metallic sheen to their skin that suggested extensive augmentation. "Identification scan," the guard said, raising a handheld device. "Of course," Jax replied, reaching for his credentials while simultaneously shifting his weight to his back foot. If this went badly, he would need to move quickly. The scanner passed over his ID chip. "Jax Merrick, Earth, observer status." The guard's expression changed subtly. "What is your business in the restricted zones during session?" "Looking for the refreshment station," Jax replied evenly. "The layout of the Nexus can be confusing for newcomers." "The human facilities are 2 levels up, Eastern Quadrant," the guard said, a note of suspicion in his voice. "This area is for authorized personnel only during emergency sessions." "My apologies," Jax said with a deferential nod. "I'll find my way there immediately." The guard studied him for a moment longer, then stepped aside. "See that you do. All delegates are to return to the main chamber in 5 minutes." Jax moved away, maintaining an unhurried pace until he turned the corner. Then he quickened his steps, heading not for the Eastern Quadrant, but for a service elevator hidden behind a decorative panel. He had perhaps minutes before the security system flagged his movements as inconsistent with his stated destination. The service elevator required a security code, but Jax had prepared for contingencies. From an inner pocket, he retrieved a small device, technically illegal for a civilian to possess, but essential for someone in his position. The bypass took 30 seconds, during which Jax kept watch on both ends of the corridor. Once inside the elevator, he descended to the maintenance level. The utilitarian surroundings contrasted sharply with the opulence above: bare metal walls, exposed conduits, and the constant hum of machinery that kept the Nexus habitable for dozens of different species with varying atmospheric requirements. Jax found a secluded corner behind a bank of environmental regulators and finally examined the datapad Kishara had given him. It required biometric authentication, not his own, but seemingly calibrated to recognize human DNA in general. An interesting security choice, suggesting the information had been specifically prepared for human eyes. The screen illuminated, displaying files with Orium government encryption. The first document was labeled Operation Eclipse, a detailed plan to discredit opposition leaders through manufactured evidence of collaboration with separatist groups. The second contained specifications for advanced weapons technology being developed by Pyroxis Corporation, technology that violated multiple Concord treaties. Most damning was a recorded conversation between Archon Veritas and Calvin Thorne, CEO of Pyroxis. They discussed not only weapon sales to restricted zones, but a coordinated plan to trigger conflicts that would necessitate military intervention and lucrative rebuilding contracts. "We can orchestrate a series of incidents in the Outer Rim," Thorne's voice said clearly. "Nothing too destructive, just enough to justify deployment of peacekeeping forces." "And the opposition?" Veritas asked. "The list you provided has been processed. We have compromising material on 17 of the 23 targets. The others will require more direct intervention." The recording ended, leaving Jax staring at the screen. If authentic, this was evidence of corruption and conspiracy at the highest levels of the Concord. No wonder Kashara had risked so much to pass it to him. The lights in the maintenance level suddenly flashed red. A calm voice announced, "Security alert! Unauthorized access detected. All personnel report to designated security checkpoints for verification." They had discovered the bypassed elevator. Jax had minutes, perhaps seconds, before security teams arrived. He quickly examined his options. Attempting to leave the Nexus entirely would be nearly impossible with heightened security. His best chance was to return to the public areas and blend in, but first, he needed to secure the data. The pad contained a transmission function, but using it would immediately alert security systems. He needed a more subtle approach. Footsteps echoed from the corridor, security personnel approaching. Jax slid behind a larger processing unit, listening as they moved methodically through the maintenance level. "We have confirmation of unauthorized access to this level," one officer reported. "Subject is likely still in the vicinity." "Proceed with caution," another replied. "Intelligence suggests potential Earth faction involvement." Of course they would blame Earth, Jax thought bitterly. Humans were always the convenient scapegoats for Concord security concerns. Staying hidden while the search continued wasn't a viable option. He needed to move, and he needed allies. Quickly accessing the pad's messaging system, he composed a heavily encrypted transmission to the one person who might help him, Rihanna Vale, a former Orium security engineer who now worked with the Political Investigation Committee. They had crossed paths years ago during a joint Earth-Orium security operation, before relations had deteriorated. Evidence of Orium Pyroxis conspiracy. Need extraction from Nexus maintenance level? Old protocols apply. He sent the message through an emergency channel that bypassed standard security monitoring, though this would only delay detection, not prevent it. Then he wiped the transmission record from the pad and prepared to move. The maintenance level had multiple access points to the Nexus's extensive ventilation system, necessary for managing the complex atmospheric needs of various species. Jax located a service panel and quickly removed it, revealing a narrow tunnel barely large enough for a human to navigate. As he pulled himself into the confined space, he heard the security team enter the room he had just vacated. "Scan shows recent biological presence," one reported. "Human physiological markers detected." "Seal all exits," came the response. "Alert the diplomatic security team. We have confirmation of human infiltration." Jax moved silently through the ventilation system, using his memory of the Nexus layout to navigate toward the lower public levels. The confined space brought back uncomfortable memories of covert operations during his military service. Operations that had ultimately led to his exile when he discovered his own government using him to eliminate political opponents under the guise of neutralizing security threats. After 20 minutes of careful movement, he reached a ventilation outlet near the public refreshment areas. Peering through the grate, he assessed the situation. Security personnel were present, but not actively searching. Their attention seemed focused on monitoring access points, rather than looking for someone already inside. Jax waited until a large group of tourists, mostly Zephyrians and a few Kalen, passed beneath his position. Then, silently removed the grate and dropped down, seamlessly integrating himself into the group. He adopted the slightly odd expression of a first-time visitor to the Nexus, gazing around with apparent fascination at the architectural marvels. His comm band vibrated again, a response from Rihanna. Central Processing Hub, Sector 7, Security Android Seraph 9 will assist. 20 minutes. Jax made his way towards Sector 7, maintaining his tourist facade. Announcements periodically echoed through the public areas. Attention all visitors. Enhanced security protocols in effect. Please present identification at all checkpoints. The Central Processing Hub was a restricted area, but adjacent to it was a public information center where visitors could access historical data about the conquered. Jax positioned himself at a terminal, appearing to browse information while actually watching the secured entrance to the processing hub. After several minutes, a security android emerged, humanoid in appearance but with the distinctive silver emblem of the Orium Security Force on its chest plate. The identification tag read, Seraph 9. The android approached Jax directly. Citizen, your assistance is required with a technical matter. It stated loudly enough for others to hear. Please follow me. Jax complied, aware that any resistance would draw unwanted attention. The android led him through a service door and into a restricted corridor. Once they were alone, Seraph 9 spoke in a different tone. Rihanna Vale has temporarily modified my operational parameters. I am authorized to assist you for precisely 18 minutes before my systems undergo automatic reset. Where is Rihanna? Jax asked. She cannot meet you directly. Orium Intelligence has flagged her previous association with you. She is under surveillance. The android led him deeper into the restricted area. The data you possess. What is its nature? Evidence of corruption and conspiracy involving Archon Veritas and Pyroxis Corporation, Jax replied, seeing no reason to withhold information from an entity that was temporarily allied with him. The android processed this. Such information would destabilize the current power structure. The probability of violent conflict resulting from its release is 78.3%. And the probability of violent conflict if this conspiracy continues unchecked? Seraph 9 paused, apparently calculating. 91.7%, with a 62.4% probability of escalation to interspecies war within 2 standard years. Then we need to expose it, Jax said firmly. They reached a secure terminal room. Seraph 9 interfaced directly with the security system, bypassing standard protocols. You have 12 minutes to upload and distribute your evidence, the android stated. After that, security overrides will detect my abnormal function. Jax connected the datapad to the terminal. Can we transmit this to all delegates' personal devices? Negative. Such transmission would be blocked by security filters. The android's metallic features remained impassive, but its processing lights flickered more rapidly. However, we can access the main chamber's emergency broadcast system. It is designed to override all other communications in crisis situations. That would display the evidence to everyone simultaneously, Jax realized. Correct. But such action would immediately trigger maximum security response. Escape would be improbable. Jax considered this. The safest option would be to transmit the data to outside sources, journalists, opposition leaders, other governments. But that approach would allow for spin, denial, controlled narrative. A public revelation in the middle of the emergency session would be undeniable. Let's do it, he decided. Can you get me back into the main chamber undetected? There is a service passage used for maintenance drones, Seraph 9 replied. It terminates behind the observer seating area. However, security checkpoints have been established at all entrances to the main chamber. I don't need to enter through an entrance, Jax said. I just need to be close enough to trigger the broadcast when the critical vote happens. The android led him through a series of increasingly narrow service corridors. Jax felt the subtle shifts in gravity and pressure that indicated they were moving through the Nexus's complex environmental systems. The emergency session is scheduled to vote on the new multidimensional alliance proposal in approximately 27 minutes. Seraph 9 informed him. This would be the optimal moment for maximum impact. As they navigated the restricted areas, Jax's mind flashed back to his final mission with Earth's Special Task Force. He had been sent to eliminate a supposed terrorist cell operating on Europa. But what he found instead was a group of political dissidents, scientists and philosophers whose only crime was opposing Earth's increasingly authoritarian government. When he refused to execute them and instead reported the truth to his superiors, he discovered how deep the corruption went. His own commanding officer had arranged for his accidental death, forcing Jax to flee and eventually seek asylum in the conquered territories. Now he was about to expose another government's corruption. The irony wasn't lost on him. "We have arrived at the access point," Seraph 9 announced, stopping before a small maintenance hatch. Beyond this point is the observation platform used for security surveillance of the main chamber. It will provide the necessary proximity for your transmission, but exposure risk is high. How long before your systems reset? 7 minutes and 22 seconds. After that, I will have no memory of assisting you, and will revert to standard security protocols. Jax nodded. Then this is where we part ways. Thank you. The android tilted its head slightly. Gratitude is unnecessary. I am following modified directives. It paused, then added. However, my predictive algorithms suggest your actions have a 43.2% chance of preventing large-scale conflict. This outcome would be preferable. With that, Seraph 9 turned and walked away, its movements already beginning to show the subtle rigidity that suggested its systems were starting to reset. Jax waited until the android was out of sight, then carefully opened the maintenance hatch. Beyond was a narrow observation platform, used by security personnel to monitor the proceedings below. It was currently unoccupied, likely because all available security forces had been diverted to search for him. From this vantage point, he had a perfect view of the main chamber. The emergency session had resumed, with Archon Viridis addressing the assembled delegates. Security personnel were stationed at all official entrances, but none were looking up at the observation platforms. Jax examined the datapad, preparing it for transmission to the main chamber's emergency system. The broadcast would need to be precisely timed, too early, and security might manage to cut it off before the most damning evidence was revealed. Too late, and the vote would already be complete. As he waited, watching the proceedings below, he spotted Kashara among the Taurian delegation. Her posture was tense, her gaze frequently scanning the room as if looking for someone, likely him. Had she expected him to return to the chamber, or was she merely concerned about the fate of the evidence she had risked so much to share? On the opposite side of the chamber, the Hazari delegation, led by Vulrex Inar, was engaged in heated discussion with Kalen representatives. Their alliance had been growing stronger in recent months, united by their shared distrust of both Earth and the Orium government. Archon Viridis raised her hands for silence. Esteemed delegates of the Solar Concord, we stand at a critical juncture. The multidimensional alliance proposal before us would strengthen our collective security and economic cooperation. The threats from separatist elements make this alliance not merely beneficial, but necessary for our continued prosperity. Jax noticed Calvin Thorne seated in the corporate observation section, a tall, gaunt human with cybernetic enhancements visible along his jawline. The CEO of Pyroxis Corporation watched the proceedings with an expression of calculated interest, occasionally making notes on his personal device. We will now proceed to final statements before the vote, Viridis continued. The chamber recognizes the delegate from Hazari. Vulrex Enar rose, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the chamber lights. The Hazari Collective has grave concerns about this proposed alliance. It grants unprecedented authority to the Orium security forces to operate within sovereign territories. We cannot support such overreach without stronger oversight provisions. The Kalen representative, Regatik, spoke next. The Kalen Dominion shares these concerns. Furthermore, we question the involvement of human corporations in critical security infrastructure. Their historical unreliability makes them unsuitable partners for such sensitive operations. Jax grimaced. The anti-human sentiment was nothing new, but it stung nonetheless. Earth's past expansionism and the recent separatist actions had tarnished humanity's reputation throughout the conquered. As the debate continued, Jax prepared the data for transmission. The emergency broadcast system was designed to override all other communications in crisis situations, displaying critical information on all screens simultaneously. Accessing it required high-level authorization, but the pad Kashara had provided contained the necessary credentials. The moment approached for the vote. Archon Viridis called for delegates to register their positions. This was it, the optimal moment when all attention would be focused on the central display screens. Jax activated the transmission. For a moment, nothing happened. Then every screen in the chamber flickered, replacing the voting interface with the evidence from Kashara's datapad. The recorded conversation between Viridis and Thorn played at maximum volume. We can orchestrate a series of incidents in the Outer Rim. Nothing too destructive, just enough to justify deployment of peacekeeping forces. And the opposition? The list you provided has been processed. We have compromising material on 17 of the 23 targets. The others will require more. Direct intervention. Chaos erupted in the chamber. Delegates rose from their seats, some shouting accusations, others calling for order. Security personnel rushed toward the central control systems, attempting to terminate the broadcast. Archon Viridis stood rigid at the podium, her expression a mask of controlled fury. Her gaze swept the chamber, finally locking onto the observation platform where Jax stood. "Security breach!" she announced, her voice cutting through the tumult. "This is fabricated evidence designed to disrupt our proceedings. Secure the chamber immediately." But the broadcast continued, now displaying documents detailing the Orium Pyroxis conspiracy, weapons sales to restricted zones, manufactured evidence against opposition leaders, plans to trigger conflicts that would necessitate intervention. Jax saw Calvin Thorn moving swiftly toward an exit, flanked by private security. The Pyroxis CEO's face betrayed no emotion, but his hasty departure spoke volumes. Security forces converged on the observation platform. Jax had perhaps seconds before they reached him. He had accomplished his mission. The evidence was public now, being recorded and transmitted by dozens of delegates and observers. But his own situation remained precarious. As the first security officers reached the platform, Jax was surprised to see Seraph 9 among them. The android's reset must have completed, returning it to standard protocols. There was no recognition in its mechanical gaze, only the programmed determination of a security unit apprehending a threat. "Halt and surrender, citizen," Seraph 9 commanded, advancing with stun baton activated. Jax raised his hand slowly, calculating his options. Direct combat with multiple security units, including Seraph 9, would be unwise. But perhaps there was another way. "Security override Taurus 7 Echo," he said clearly, hoping the emergency codes Rihanna had mentioned were still active. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Seraph 9 paused, its operational lights flickering rapidly. The other security officers continued their advance, but the android suddenly moved to intercept them. "Priority alert," Seraph 9 announced. "Evacuation protocol initiated. All security personnel report to main exits." The officers hesitated, confused by the contradictory orders. Seraph 9 used their momentary uncertainty to position itself between them and Jax. Security systems compromised. The android continued. Manual verification required at all stations. Taking advantage of the confusion, Jax slipped through a side access panel that connected to the observation platform. He had minutes at most before the ruse was discovered. The service corridor beyond was dimly lit and narrower than standard passages, designed for maintenance drones rather than humanoid traffic. Jax moved quickly, hearing alarms blaring throughout the Nexus. The entire station would be on lockdown now, all exits monitored. His comm band vibrated. Another message from Rihanna. Northeast maintenance shaft, level 3, emergency evacuation pod. Hurry. The northeast quadrant was nearly a kilometer away through the maze-like interior of the Nexus. Reaching it would require avoiding numerous security checkpoints and patrols. But Jax had no alternative. He navigated through service tunnels and maintenance shafts, using his knowledge of standard security protocols to anticipate patrol patterns. Twice, he was forced to hide in equipment recesses as security teams passed by. The Nexus's internal communication system continuously broadcast security alerts, describing him as armed and dangerous, an exaggeration designed to justify lethal force if he resisted. As he approached the northeast quadrant, he encountered an unexpected obstacle, a section of corridor blocked by emergency containment fields. The Nexus's security systems were isolating segments of the station to restrict movement. Jax examined the nearby maintenance panel. Bypassing the containment field would trigger additional alarms, but there was no alternative route to the evacuation pod. As he prepared to override the system, he heard a sound behind him, the distinctive hum of an energy weapon powering up. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, human." Jax turned slowly to find himself facing Vulrex Inar, the Hazari delegate. The insectoid diplomat held a compact disruptor pistol, a weapon that should have been impossible to bring into the Nexus. "Interesting timing, Ambassador," Jax said carefully. "I wouldn't have expected you to be in the maintenance areas during a security lockdown." Inar's compound eyes gleamed in the dim light. "I've been tracking your movements since you left the main chamber. The Hazari have our own methods of monitoring communications." "Are you here to stop me or help me?" Jax asked, keeping his hands visible. "The evidence I revealed benefits your faction as much as anyone." "True," Inar acknowledged, mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "The Orium government's corruption benefits our separatist narrative. However, your human involvement complicates matters. If you escape, Earth will claim credit for exposing the conspiracy." Jax assessed his options. The Hazari was between him and the evacuation pod. Engaging in combat would be risky, even if he overpowered Inar. The noise would attract security. "I have no interest in claiming credit," Jax said. "My goal was to expose the truth, nothing more." "Noble sentiments," Inar replied, his tone suggesting skepticism. "But ultimately irrelevant. The political reality is that this incident will reshape conquered power dynamics. The Hazari must ensure we benefit appropriately." The standoff was interrupted by a new voice, synthesized but distinctly feminine. "Ambassador Inar, your presence in restricted areas during a security alert violates diplomatic protocols." Seraph 9 emerged from a connecting passage, its humanoid form moving with mechanical precision. The android's weapon systems were active, but not yet targeted. Inar's compound eyes flickered between Jax and the android. "This is a diplomatic matter. Security unit, stand down." "Unable to comply," Seraph 9 responded. "Current directives prioritize evacuation of all non-security personnel from restricted areas. Please accompany me to the diplomatic quarter." Jax realized that Rihanna must have managed to override the android's reset again, or perhaps installed a deeper programming layer that had survived the initial reset. Either way, Seraph 9 was creating an opportunity for escape. Inar seemed to recognize the impasse. The ambassador lowered his weapon slightly. This conversation isn't finished, human. The political landscape is shifting, and Earth would be wise to consider its alliances carefully in the coming days. With that enigmatic warning, Enar allowed Seraph 9 to escort him toward the diplomatic quarter, leaving Jax alone at the containment field. Wasting no time, Jax bypassed the field's security and continued toward the evacuation point. The northeast maintenance shaft was used primarily for emergency repairs to the Nexus's outer hull, a dangerous area due to potential exposure to space. When he reached the designated location, he found not the standard emergency evacuation pod he had expected, but a sleek, unmarked shuttle docked at a maintenance airlock. Standing beside it was Rihanna Vale. She looked much as he remembered her, tall and angular, with the blue-tinted skin characteristic of Orium natives, though less pronounced than Viridis's royal coloration. Her expression was tense but determined. "You certainly know how to create a diplomatic incident," she said, by way of greeting. "The entire Concord is in an uproar." "The evidence?" Jax asked, prioritizing their mission over pleasantries. "Already being distributed across multiple secure channels," Rihanna confirmed. "News outlets throughout the Concord are broadcasting it. Archon Viridis is attempting to dismiss it as fabricated, but too many independent sources have verified its authenticity." "And Thorn?" "Fled the Nexus aboard his corporate shuttle, but the Zephyrian delegation has dispatched vessels to intercept. They're particularly outraged by the weapon sales to territories near their homeworld." Jax nodded, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and weariness. "So it worked." "For certain values of worked," Rihanna replied dryly. "The Concord hasn't seen political chaos like this in decades. Multiple factions are already positioning themselves to fill the power vacuum when Viridis falls. "Including the Hazari," Jax noted, recalling his encounter with Enar. "Especially the Hazari," Rihanna agreed. "They've been looking for an excuse to break from the Concord for years. This may give them the justification they need." She gestured toward the shuttle. "But that's a problem for another day. Right now, we need to get you off the Nexus before security decides to make you disappear permanently." As they boarded the shuttle, Jax asked, "Where are we going?" "There's a Zephyrian outpost in the asteroid belt that's agreed to grant you temporary sanctuary," Rihanna explained, initiating the launch sequence. "They were among the first to verify the evidence you revealed, particularly the parts about Pyroxis weapons being deployed near their colonies." The shuttle detached from the Nexus with a slight shudder. Through the viewport, Jax could see security vessels beginning to mobilize, but they were too late to prevent their departure. As they accelerated away from Neptune's orbit, Rihanna added, "You should know that you've made powerful enemies today. The Orium government won't forget this humiliation, and Pyroxis Corporation has resources throughout Concord space." "I'm used to powerful enemies," Jax replied, watching the Celestia Nexus recede into the distance. "At least these ones can't claim I'm a traitor to my own kind." The shuttle entered FTL transit, the stars stretching into lines of light around them. Jax felt the familiar disorientation of faster-than-light travel, a physical sensation that mirrored his current political position. He had exposed the truth, but at what cost? And where would he go when temporary sanctuary ended? "What will you do now?" Rihanna asked, as if reading his thoughts. Jax considered the question. "The same thing I've been doing since I left Earth. Survive. But maybe with a clearer purpose." "Which is?" "Ensuring the truth remains exposed," he said. "Viridis and Thorn were just the visible faces of a deeper problem. There are others involved, others who will try to contain the damage and preserve their power." Rihanna studied him thoughtfully. "You're proposing to continue investigating, alone?" "Not necessarily alone," Jax replied, meeting her gaze. "Kashara took an enormous risk providing that evidence. There must be others within the Concord who recognize the corruption and want change." "Perhaps," Rihanna acknowledged. But organizing such individuals would be dangerous, possibly more dangerous than what you've already done. Jax smiled slightly. Danger seems to be my natural habitat these days. The shuttle's communication system chimed, indicating an incoming transmission. Rihanna checked the source and raised an eyebrow in surprise. It's from the Zephyrian Council, she said. Priority channel. Jax nodded for her to accept the transmission. A holographic image formed above the console. A Zephyrian elder, his cloud-like skin shifting in patterns that indicated formal address. Jax Merrick, the elder, began without preamble. The Zephyrian Council acknowledges your service in exposing corruption within the Orium government. While we do not condone the methods employed, we recognize the importance of the information revealed. Thank you, Elder, Jax replied, maintaining the formal tone appropriate for Zephyrian diplomacy. The Concord stands at a crossroads, the Elder continued. The revelation of such high-level corruption has shaken the foundation of our alliance. Many factions now seek to reshape the power structure to their advantage, some with honorable intentions, others less so. Jax waited, sensing there was more to this communication than mere acknowledgement. The Zephyrian Council believes that balance must be maintained if the Concord is to survive this crisis. To that end, we wish to offer you a position as security advisor to our delegation. The offer took Jax by surprise. I'm honored, Elder, but I'm hardly a popular figure in Concord politics at the moment. Precisely why your perspective would be valuable, the Elder replied. You have demonstrated a willingness to stand for truth regardless of political consequences. Such integrity is rare and needed in these uncertain times. Jax glanced at Rihanna, who appeared equally surprised by the offer. May I have time to consider? Of course, but do not delay overlong. Events are moving rapidly, and many seek to control the narrative of what has occurred. The Elder's form shifted into the pattern of formal conclusion. We await your response, Jax Merrick. The transmission ended, leaving Jax and Rihanna in momentary silence. Well, Rihanna said finally, it seems you've impressed the Zephyrians. Or they see a useful tool in the coming political battle, Jax replied. Though without bitterness, pragmatism was a quality he respected. Perhaps both, Rihanna suggested. The question is, will you accept? Jax turned back to the viewport, watching the hypnotic patterns of FTL transit. The past hours had transformed his situation completely. From a tolerated observer in the shadows of Concord politics, he had become a central figure in a power struggle that would reshape interstellar relations for years to come. The lone human that everyone had feared had indeed proved dangerous, but not in the way they had anticipated. Yes, he decided. I'll accept. Not because I believe I can change the Concord single-handedly, but because someone needs to stand witness to what comes next. Rihanna nodded. Then I'll help you prepare for your new role. The political landscape will be treacherous, especially for a human in such a visible position. I'm counting on it, Jax replied. The corruption we exposed goes deeper than Viridis and Thorn. The only way to root it out completely is to draw it into the open. Using yourself as bait, Rihanna observed with a frown. Using truth as a weapon, Jax corrected. It's worked so far. The shuttle continued its journey toward the asteroid belt, carrying them toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the shockwaves of their actions were already spreading throughout the solar Concord, reshaping alliances and threatening decades of political stability. In the Celestia Nexus, emergency sessions continued as delegates positioned themselves in the new reality. Archon Viridis faced mounting evidence of her corruption, while Calvin Thorne's shuttle was intercepted by Zephyrian vessels, forcing the Pyroxis CEO to face questions about his corporation's activities. Ambassador Kashara of the Taurians issued a formal statement condemning the Orium government's actions and calling for a complete restructuring of the Concord's leadership. The Hazari delegation, led by Vulrex Inar, used the crisis to advance their separatist agenda, arguing that the corruption revealed was symptomatic of fundamental flaws in the Concord's structure. Through it all, the data Jax had revealed continued to spread, impossible to contain or dismiss. The truth, once exposed, took on a life of its own. 1 month later, Jax Merrick stood at the back of the rebuilt Celestia Nexus chamber, watching as the newly formed Oversight Council convened its first session. The investigation into the Orium Pyroxis conspiracy had resulted in dozens of arrests, including Archon Veritas and several high-ranking officials. Calvin Thorne remained in Zephyrian custody, awaiting trial for violations of Concord treaties. The political landscape had indeed shifted dramatically. The Hazari had withdrawn from full Concord membership, though they maintained observer status. The Kalen had leveraged their position to gain greater representation in security matters. The Taurians, led by Kashara, had emerged as advocates for transparency and ethical governance. And Jax, the lone human who had once been feared and dismissed, now served as security advisor to the Zephyrian delegation, a position that gave him both visibility and influence in Concord affairs. Many still regarded him with suspicion, particularly those who had lost power in the restructuring, but others had come to respect his commitment to truth, regardless of political consequences. Rihanna Vale had been appointed to the new Political Investigation Committee, tasked with preventing future corruption at the highest levels. Her expertise in security systems made her particularly effective at identifying vulnerabilities in the Concord's governance structures. As the session proceeded, Jax noted with interest that Seraph 9 had been redesignated as a diplomatic security unit, assigned specifically to the Zephyrian delegation. Whether this was Rihanna's doing or a result of the android's unusual behavior during the crisis, he couldn't be sure, but he appreciated having the unit nearby, especially given the threats that still lingered. "The human still watches from the shadows," a voice observed. Jax turned to find Ambassador Kashara standing beside him, her scaled features set in what he had learned to recognize as an expression of amusement. "Old habits," Jax replied with a slight smile. "Though I'm finding the view from the back of the room provides certain advantages." "Indeed. One sees patterns that might be missed from the center." Kashara's vertical pupils contracted thoughtfully. "The Concord has changed. Jax Merrick. Not perfectly, perhaps, but significantly." "Thanks to your courage in providing the evidence," Jax acknowledged. Kashara made a dismissive gesture. "I merely passed information. You chose to act upon it, at great personal risk." "A risk that continues," Jax noted. "There are still those who would prefer the old order, with its convenient corruption and predictable power structures." "Which is why your continued presence is essential," Kashara replied. "The lone human that everyone feared has become a symbol of accountability. That symbol must remain visible if the changes we've begun are to endure." As Kashara moved away to join her delegation, Jax returned his attention to the proceedings. The new council was discussing reforms to interstellar trade regulations, mundane perhaps, but crucial to preventing the kind of corporate influence that had enabled Pyroxis's activities. He observed the delegates with a professional eye, noting alliances forming and dissolving in the subtle language of interspecies diplomacy. The Concord was healing, but the process was far from complete. New challenges would emerge. New corruptions would take root if not vigilantly guarded against. Jax's comm band vibrated with a message from Rihanna. "Security alert. Credible threat detected against Zephyrian delegation. Exercise caution." He acknowledged the warning without surprise. Those who had lost power would not surrender it without resistance. The coming months and years would bring continued challenges, perhaps even greater dangers than those already faced. But for now, the lone human in the back of the room watched and waited, no longer feared, but respected. The truth had proven more powerful than corruption, and Jax Merrick had found his purpose in ensuring it remained so. As the session continued, delegates occasionally glanced toward the back of the chamber, where the human observer stood quietly. Some nodded in acknowledgement. Others still regarded him with caution, but all recognized his significance in the new political reality of the solar concord. The feared outsider had become an essential insider, a transformation that symbolized the Concord's own evolution toward greater transparency and accountability. Whatever challenges lay ahead, the foundations had been laid for a more just interstellar community. And Jax Merrick, once exiled and alone, had found his place within it, still watching from the shadows, but now as guardian rather than outcast.